The survey drone almost missed it. Vrail 6, xenobiologist, second class aboard the Times Undying Current, had been cataloging megafauna migration routes on Kareth 9 for 11 standard cycles when the anomaly pinged his console. He almost dismissed it as sensor drift. Kareth 9 was a Class 10 Deathworld, the highest designation the Galactic Survey Commission ever assigned. Atmospheric acid content of 14%. Gravity at 1.4 standard. Fauna capable of breaching military-grade hull plating with unassisted limbs. Nobody came to Kareth 9 voluntarily. Nobody survived Kareth 9 accidentally. And yet, Daejun, he said quietly, turning in his seat to face the mission's human liaison officer. Come look at this. Lieutenant Commander Daejun Oh of the Terran Expeditionary Survey Corps crossed the bridge in 3 steps, bent over Vrail 6's console, and went very still. On the thermal feed, nestled inside the den of a Times Korova, times a 6-limbed ambush predator, massing at roughly 800 kilograms, was a small, unmistakably human heat signature. Small. Very small. That's a child, Daejun said. It appears so. Inside a Korova then. Yes. Daejun straightened slowly. His face had gone to that flat, unreadable expression that Vrail 6 had learned, over 11 cycles of fieldwork together, meant the human was processing something that violated his categories for how the universe was supposed to work. Pull up the archive scan, Daejun said. Full historical. How long has that signature been there? Vrail 6 ran the query. The drone archive went back 4 standard years, the full length of the survey mission. He filtered for the den coordinates, cross-referenced the heat signature cluster. The result sat on the screen for a long moment before either of them spoke. 4 years, Vrail 6 said softly. The small signature has been present for the entire duration of our observation window. The Korova pack has been in continuous residence. The human child has been with them for at least 4 years. How old does the signature read? Approximate mass and thermal output suggest a human child between 4 and 6 standard years of age. Daejun did the math out loud, the way he always did when he was working through something difficult. If it's 5 years old and has been here 4 years, it was abandoned or crashed here as an infant. Maybe younger, he exhaled through his nose, on a Class 10 world. Statistically speaking, Vrail 6 offered. The probability of infant survival on Kareth 9 without shelter, nutrition, and protection is effectively 0, Daejun finished, which means the Korova gave it all 3. They took the shuttle down at first light, after Vrail 6 spent 6 hours arguing against it, presenting 17 separate risk assessments, and ultimately watching Daejun put on his field gear anyway. The Korova den was built into a basalt overhang above a river of semi-caustic runoff. It was, Vrail 6 had to admit, an exceptionally well-chosen shelter. The acidic vapor from the river discouraged most competing predators, and the basalt overhang blocked the worst of the electromagnetic storm fronts that rolled through the region every 48 hours. The pack that lived here had survived on Kareth 9 longer than most species managed. They were not animals that made mistakes. They had chosen to keep the child. That was not an accident. Daejun stopped the shuttle 50 meters out and cut the engines. He sat for a moment, watching the den entrance on his visor feed. Then he reached into his kit bag and produced a ration pack, 2 signal flares he'd repurposed as noisemakers, and a piece of processed kelp jerky that had been in his bag long enough to achieve a considerable aromatic presence. "What are you doing?" Vrail 6 asked. "Introducing myself politely," Daejun said. He stepped out of the shuttle alone. He moved slowly, kept low, and made himself as unthreatening as possible, though Vrail 6 noted that the human's idea of unthreatening involved very deliberate positioning of his hands and a careful, measured approach pattern that suggested someone who understood exactly how predators read body language. Daejun had grown up on a farming settlement in a rural province. He had spent his childhood around large animals. He understood, in a way Vrail 6 did not quite, the grammar of creatures that could kill you. He stopped at 30 meters, set the jerky on the ground, stepped back. For 4 minutes, nothing happened. Then the largest Korova Vrail 6 had ever seen in the survey data stepped out of the den entrance. It stood over 2 meters at the shoulder. Its 6 limbs moved with the deliberate precision of something that had never in its entire life needed to rush. Its 3 sensory clusters locked onto Daejun with the focused attention of a system calculating threat vectors. Daejun didn't move. The Korova lowered its head toward the jerky, sniffed it with slow, enormous care. Then it looked back at Daejun. Daejun lowered his own head, not servile, not cowering, but the specific gesture of deliberate non-challenge that the survey data had documented Korova using when approaching injured packmates. The Korova made a sound, low, resonant, felt more in the chest than heard with the ears. And then a child came out of the den. She was, Vrail 6 estimated, approximately 5 standard years old. She was small, even by human standards, with dark hair matted with the mineral dust that coated everything on Karath 9, wearing what appeared to be a combination of survival suit remnants and Korova fur that had been deliberately draped around her small shoulders. Her feet were bare. She moved with the easy confidence of a creature that had grown up knowing exactly where to step. She looked at Daejun with dark, serious eyes. Daejun crouched down to her level. He didn't speak immediately. He waited. She studied him for a long time. Then she made a sound, the same low, resonant chord that the Korova had produced. A greeting, an identification. I am here. I am not a threat. Daejun answered it as best he could, pitching his voice low and letting the sound roll from his chest rather than his throat. It wasn't perfect, but it was recognizable. The child's expression shifted, something cracking open behind the careful, measuring assessment. She took 1 step toward him, then another. The large Korova watched, did not move. Vrail 6 realized, watching from the shuttle, that the Pack Alpha was permitting the approach, was watching to see if the new creature would prove safe. Had perhaps been watching the shuttle since it landed, had made a calculation about the being who had approached slowly, shown no weapons, offered food, and bowed its head. The Korova had assessed Daejun, and they had found him acceptable. The child stopped 2 arms' lengths from Daejun. She reached out and touched his hand with 2 fingers, the way a Korova cub touched a packmate to read their chemical signature. Daejun stayed perfectly still and let her do it. She made a sound softer this time, something that Vrail 6 had no data for, something that might have been a name. Back on the Time's undying current, Vrail 6 filed his report with hands that were not quite steady. The child was in good health. Extraordinary health, in fact. The Karath 9 atmospheric exposure should have caused progressive pulmonary damage. But the Korova den's peculiar internal microclimate, sustained by the pack's collective body heat and the basalt filtration of the overhang, had provided cleaner air than any open exposure on the planet's surface. She had been fed, sheltered, defended. 4 years of Korova behavioral data would need to be entirely revised. They had found no record of a crashed vessel matching her approximate arrival date. No missing persons report filed through Terran or Allied channels. Someone had left her there. On a Class 10 Deathworld, as an infant, Vrail 6 did not have the framework to understand what kind of being did that. He did, however, have a growing understanding of what kind of being survived it. He wrote in his report, "The child's developmental profile shows no signs of trauma response or psychological fragmentation. She is alert, physically capable, and demonstrates advanced nonverbal communication consistent with Korova Pack social structures. She appears, by any measurable standard, to be thriving. She has been named, provisionally, Sora, a word. Lieutenant Commander O informs me, means sky in his native language. It is, he says, because the Korova have a habit of looking up." He paused over the final line of the report for a long time. Then he wrote it anyway. It should be noted that this child was left on what every classification system in the known galaxy agrees is an unsurvivable world. She not only survived, she was, by the time of recovery, respected. We have been studying Karath 9 for 4 years. We have been afraid of it for 4 years. She lived inside it. I am beginning to understand why the rest of the galaxy is afraid of humans.